Okay, we just had Mark England on the podcast. He's a mindset coach and everything NLP and to do with the breath and using your words correctly. We went deep into like what it means to use your words correctly, which is fucking pretty cool. And what a humble, good guy and just like authentic, man. Another amazing potty, eh?
Yeah, went heavy into the story and the story you're telling yourself and how no matter what the story you're telling yourself is, if it's a negative story and it puts you in a victim mindset, how do you get out of the victim mindset? How do you empower yourself and retell your own story? And why it's so important to write these things down. Otherwise, it's a whirlwind in your head that never gets put out. So you can have a bad story, write it down, then rewrite a good story, and then it starts switching in your head like that. Another little tip he said was, when you write your goals down, it's like an 1,000% more chance of completing it compared to just staying in your head. So that is, go write your goals right now. It's a reminder.
Yeah. What would best describe you to just introduce to the listeners?
Yeah, that's a good question. I've been a full-time researcher, coach, and now teacher of mindset for the past 17 years.
Shit, yeah.
Yeah, full-time, somewhere between full-time and overtime the whole time. And now I'm the head coach, or I'm one of the co-founders and head coach of Enlifted. I deliver all of our trainings. I was a elementary school PE teacher before I got into this. So I have a degree in teaching. I come from a teaching background.
Sick.
And we're known as the language people.
Yeah. I saw that.
We focus on words a lot, words and breath, and how that influences the story that we tell ourselves. That's our definition of mindset. I've studied NLP. I got to 8. There was a period of time about 2010 to 13 where I flew around the world numerous times. I got to 8 of the 9 founders of the systems that most impressed me that I knew of. I mean, there's a lot of cool stuff out there that works wonders that I just never heard of. NLP was one of them. I got to study with Richard Bandler.
Cool.
Did a couple of trainings with him. Yeah. I've got to watch him work his magic. Yeah, I'm a connoisseur of what works and what's simple.
Yeah, beautiful. I think that was perfect. We might just edit that in because it kind of you just nailed what you really do. So guys who are just listening, Mark England on the Corrective Culture podcast, and we're really grateful for your time today. Thanks for coming on, brother.
Likewise, gentlemen. Pleasure to meet you. And as I said on the Instagram voice messages, anybody that Ryan Sprague says, hey, you got to meet these guys or go on their show or whatever, got to come to their party, or can I bring these? I'm all about it. That guy he is as advertised.
Yeah,
that's good to hear,
fun.
man. Yeah.
He's infectious, his energy, man. I got off that last potty with him and I was just like, fuck, dude, I want to go like crush some shit.
Yeah, and like you don't even smoke weed too.
Yeah, I know. I was like, man, I need to get a hit.
Yeah.
Dude, I'm the same way. I don't smoke weed either. I mean, of course, I tried it. I used to, and I get around him and I feel like I have. He's like that 24/7.
Yeah. Yeah, he's a happy, good energy, man. Really good energy and authentic. You can tell. You can
so
see
authentic,
that is him. But yeah, awesome, man. Keen to have you on. And just what you said before, how you were like full-time researcher. Like, how did you get to that position to be able to do that? To be able to study full-time?
Yeah. So you all are jiu-jitsu aficionados?
Yeah.
You guys train?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So I've now take out a handful of beautiful women in my life, and I've fallen in love on site twice. Once, so I wrestled in high school. That's cool. I pin you, you pin me. And the first time I went to a jiu-jitsu class in 1996, my freshman year of college, and some dude choked me out with the most basic shit you've ever seen.
Mm-hmm.
He took his fist, stuck it in my throat, and then pulled down on the back of my head.
Wow.
And the whole room went dark. He let go, and I was like, oh my God, I got to learn this stuff.
Yeah.
So I went on a bender. I trained hard for 6 years, had a handful of amateur MMA fights, did well on the regional scene, got into kickboxing, won a couple of state titles, and moved over to Thailand in 2002. And the plan was to stay over there for 2 years, and go pro. And that's exactly what did not happen.
Mm.
6 months after I was there, I was having my second knee surgery.
Wow.
And the wheels came off the bus, as we like to say over here in the States. And I remember like it was fucking yesterday when the doctor said post-surgery, he goes, "Mark, your career as a fighter is over.
Wow.
You could become a very good swimmer."
Oh.
And at 27, when all you want to do is swang and bang, and I'm making pictures of me swimming laps next to grandma at the pool, darkness descended. And I entrenched a dumpster fire of a victim mentality about what had happened, because secretly I was telling myself this story that I was not good enough and everybody was better than me, and I was somehow doomed to fail and there was something wrong with me. And now I make this big move. I mean, I'd only had my passport for 2 years. Us Yanks were not that well traveled internationally, as you all know. And I had 3 going away parties. It was this really big deal, right? And not many people went to Thailand back in the day to train, like then. And and so now I make the biggest move of my life and I fall flat on my face. And I now have the final piece of damning evidence in a case that I was secretly making against myself, that I was a born loser. And so I didn't laugh for a year, fellas.
Wow.
Because that's what the victim mentality will do. It'll suck the joy right out of somebody, including their breath. And get them hyper focused on all the wrong things and keep them there unless they can find a way to somehow change the story they're telling themselves. So I thought I was only going to be over there for a couple of years. I ended up living there for 10, which still sounds strange to say. I was over there for a decade. And so the first 5 years, this is a long-winded answer.
It's good. I'm into it, man.
Yeah.
To the question, how do you get it turn into a full-time language geek? And so after a year of being a miserable bastard, the first 5 years I was over there, I was an elementary school PE teacher at an international school. The second 5, I was a coach at a cleansing resort on an island in the Gulf of Thailand. And so while I was teaching, my vice principal came back and he said, "Hey man, I just got back from this really cool spa down on Koh Samui, and they're doing these cleanses, and I think you'd like it." And I'd had some acupuncture in college, and I was like, you know what? That sounds weird and cool. I'll go down there and try it out. So I went down and paid to not eat for an entire week. I paid them to not eat. It's a great business model. And while I was down there, I went to and me and all my wisdom, I laughed at it at the time, an emotional detoxification workshop.
Yeah, right.
I was like,
wow.
It's like emotional detox. But I went, thank goodness. And I met a guy that would end up being my mentor in this work, a guy by the name of Barry Musgrave. He's still working with people. He sees one client a day, lives in Athens, and he's 80. And he talked about words, and he talked about stories, and he talked about breath. And then he asked, is anybody stuck on a story? And this woman shot her hand up, and she told and I mean, it was a very painful, very painful, embarrassing, humiliating story of a breakup that happened when she was in college. And this is about 4 years ago. And it was so bad, she hadn't gotten in a relationship since. And she was a self-proclaimed man-hater. And the short story is that her and her friends got a house down at the beach for beach week. And then her boyfriend's friend and all his friends got the house next door. Add alcohol, press play. And so her boyfriend hooked up with one of her best friends in front of everybody one night, and then dumped her in front of everybody the next night.
Whoa.
Ouch. Can we all say ouchie on the three?
Yeah.
It was that's a stinger.
Yeah.
and he had her tell the story 3 times. The first time he didn't touch any of the words, nothing, just let her roll. And at the end, she was angry and crying. And then he said, okay, tell that exact same story again. And she did. And he changed a couple of the words, and you could see her just loosen up a little bit about what that story meant. And then this guy knew what he was doing. The third time, he stopped her at the Lord of the Rings spell. So Webster's definition of a spell, not mine, is a word or a combination of words of great influence. That's what it is. And he stopped her at the spell that held the whole thing together, her whole victim mentality about the whole thing. And the sentence was, he did that to me. And he said, that sentence right there, say that again. He did that to me. She was pissed. One more time. He did that to me. And then he goes, that last word, take out that last word and put in himself. And it was such a radical departure from the story she'd been relentlessly telling herself. It was clunky in the delivery, and it went up at the end. It's called up talk. He did that to himself, and then the breath unlocks. He did do that to himself. And then she started just going off about why the whole thing ended up being worse for him. And then she finished like, oh, it was never going to work out anyway. He was actually really weird. And she walked out with a new story. And so the first time I ever fell in love on site, minus beautiful women, was when I got choked out. And I don't roll anymore. Still do a little bit of kickboxing, but I'm a devout MMA fan. It's the only sport I follow. I got I got the very first UFC in November 1993, and I've been literate since. Sick. And then the second time was when I saw him do that with a sentence, with that story, and I was like, that shit is cool as hell. I don't know what I just witnessed. I've got a he did that to me story. He shouldn't have kicked that hard. We were just warming up. And that sent me, and I've been obsessed since. And I was a horrible student in school, man. I mean, worse than a bad student. I was not disruptive. I was destructive because I was bored out of my mind. And kids aren't supposed to sit that long.
Fucking hell.
By the way, but that's a whole other conversation. And I can take a shit on the public school systems in the States because I came up in them and I have a degree in how to enforce it. So, but this, on the other hand, fellas, this holds my attention. And this is my 431st podcast that I've gone on.
Whoa. Talking
about this one thing, how our words influence us for better and for worse. And so I'm very happy to be on here. Thank you for having me, and thanks everybody for listening.
What an intro, man. That was so good.
That's such a cool story, dude. It's the story and finding that story can be so powerful. It's like, so I guess to bring that story out of like other people. So if you were to work with a client, would you just go about it the same route and say, okay, well, tell me why you're upset. Tell me why you cry at night. Tell me why you're, and just hear what comes out and then do it in your own way?
That's a fantastic question. I initially would, and in a short amount of time, I would get them writing the story out.
Right.
Conversationally. So conversational writing is writing as if you're telling the story. I don't make the rules. Half sentences and bullet points. It doesn't summon the magic. It doesn't summon the emotion. It's not enough content for them to get to the meaning. And there is a profound difference when it comes to helping someone change their mindset. Let's get this on the table now. So in my personal and professional opinion, take it with a grain of salt because I'm one of the co-founders. Enlifted, that's us. We have the very best definition of mindset in the game. You can ask Google. You can Google the definition of mindset. There's 17 definitions on the first page alone. And for something that gets so talked about so much in sports performance, in just general healing and personal development, there's no unified definition of what the damn thing is. So how are we supposed to work on it? Work on my mindset? Okay, well, you tell me what it is. What is it? And you ask people, and it's like, blah, blah, blah. So like I said, 17 definitions on the first page of Google, and half of them are super complicated. So the Enlifted definition of mindset is the story that we tell ourselves. That's what it is. It's a story. I don't care what it is. You got stories about your body. You got stories about your money. You got stories about your girlfriends, your boyfriends. You got stories about the government. You got stories about what you can do. Oh, I got stories about the government. Damn sure I do. Yeah, I'm just like Ryan Sprague on all that shit. He and I align completely across the board, politically speaking. That's one of the reasons I love that motherfucker. Is it okay if we cuss on here?
Yeah.
100%.
Okay, great. Yeah. And so there is a profound difference in someone's ability to help, let's say their client in this case, change the story they're telling themselves about something once the story is written down. Most people do not write anything down. And a story kept in the head, it swirls. It swirls. It takes up a tremendous amount of space. Where does it start? Where does it stop? There's the worst part again. Ouch. Once a story is written down, though, now it's finite. There's a beginning word and an end word. And we've certified 430 Enlifted coaches so far in the Enlifted method level 1. There's multiple levels. And most of those coaches coach virtually. And so what we do, it's a really cool way to do it. And it's very simple. So we get on a Zoom call just like this with our clients, and they have a Google Doc. They have access to a Google Doc. We have access to that same Google Doc, and they write out their story. So we hit share screen, and if they're in Australia and I'm in Florida, which is why I'm sunburnt down here doing American gangster shit with my friends. You can be anywhere in the world with someone and be on the same page with them. And so we get our clients to write their stories out. And once the words are on paper and both you and your client are looking at the same set of story, or the same set of words, the exact same story, it takes so much dumb shit out of the conversation when it comes to coaching. Because then I can help them change their words, and they can see their words changing. And not only that, we can get the breath in there. I can elaborate on that extensively here if you want me to. And when you're able, it's just like jujitsu. When you can get leverage, and when you understand the mechanics of storytelling, the story from a coaching perspective, then it frees you from thinking you have to have all the right answers for your clients. That's called smarty pants coaching. That's what we call it. When a coach thinks that they have to have all the right answers for all their clients' problems, and they need to be perfect and wise and smart. When you know how to ask good questions and get the stories out of your client's head and on paper, and unlock their breath, and then change some words, you don't have to have all the right answers for their life. You just need a handful of good questions in a Google Doc or a piece of paper.
Man, that's yeah, I think what you said then with this changing the words, because a lot of models will just be and the swell. How you said the swell. A lot of as you said that, I looked at this chair in front of me, which I'm looking at a swell, right? Which we spoke about in the last podcast. But anyway, how people, most, I guess, psychological or wellness or healing trauma or whatever you want to call it, models are just talking about the story, right? And then that's the swirl, because they feel good. Everyone feels good talking about the story for a little bit, right? And then 2 days later, you're back, you're feeling shit again. And then you want to talk about it again with somebody else. And then the story just keeps getting solidified in your head. And I clicked on one of your videos earlier today, and how it was a lady in the podcast with you, and she was talking about these people that are addicted to healing, all these healing retreats, healing groups, healing this, from the same thing over and over again. are really just addicted to the victim archetype, and which is brutal for some people to hear. And there's some people that will disagree with that, right? But for me, that resonates. I'm like, oh, I can see it. I can see it in others. I can see it with the guy that wants to go to a million men's work things, but you can still see that where they were. And it comes back to that story, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Which is majorly.
Which is gold.
Yeah, and with the whole check model too, it's like thoughts are at the very, very top of the hierarchy. So like essentially what you're saying to me is that you're going to the very, very top of where it needs to change. It goes thoughts and breathing actually. So the two major things that are right at the top, and that's why I feel like to me it makes sense that you'd get some phenomenal results. And we did this morning on Spirit Gym, we're writing out our own myth. So myth just being, a story that tells itself. And it was so interesting, man. Like for me, I started it and it was like, there once was this little boy who grew up and he was very kind and loving and gentle. And then life hardened him through that's about all I got to. But I was just like, even that, I was like, holy shit, like this is powerful stuff. And I don't think it's by chance we're sitting here talking about stories today.
What do you mean the story that tells itself?
Well, the story that tells itself. So what I thought about, meditated on that was like, the story that tells itself means the story that comes to you at the moment that comes up.
Right.
So like as I'm writing, I'm going, I was this kid, blah, blah, blah. And then something else comes in. Okay, I'm writing that down. Mm-hmm. So a story that tells itself, that's my definition.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool. So now we've got to reflect on what stories am I telling myself? And then I think of this relating to almost like an MMA fight, man, or like, you know how the go-to fear of I'm going to get knocked out in front of all my friends story as when you have your first fight, or I'm going to get subbed in at my jiu-jitsu comp, or these things. Do you just evolve the story and make it a better one that makes them feel good, or do you choose a better story, or how do you work with that?
Good question. It depends on the client or the athlete. Some people would respond better to let's say writing out the story of them going and doing well at the competition. Okay, very rarely does someone have the story of how they want the competition to go spelled out. And once you can look at that as a goal. And there's a very big difference between dreams and goals. Dreams are kept in the head. Goals are written down. If it's not written down, it's not a goal. It's a dream. And based on a 30-year goal setting study in the United States, once pen hits paper about something that someone wants to do, as in they turn a dream into a goal, then the likelihood of it transpiring goes up 1,000%. It's 10 times more likely to happen. So
wow,
that's one direction that you could go with helping your client or your athlete with their mindset in context to the competition, which is the story they're telling themselves about the competition. Now, if someone was terrified of being knocked out in front of their friends, I would very likely have them write out, it's called catastrophizing, when someone just makes the worst case. It's worrying on steroids. Worrying is, you're worrying about things. Catastrophizing is when you're making the worst case scenario play out over and over and over in your head. It's taking up the entirety of your mental real estate. It's keeping you jammed in that upregulated stress state, trapping your breath in your chest, just draining the gas tank. It's a problem for some people. And what I'll very likely do there is have them write out the story in detail. And it sounds counterintuitive. Well, I don't want to write that out. I don't want that to happen. Yeah, no shit. Let's get it out of your head so you stop replaying that movie over and over and over again. Let's get that thing on paper. And what inevitably happens in that process is the picture goes from really big and scary to, okay, I can manage that. Especially when you get into the breathing aspect of storytelling. So once again, mindset is the story that we tell ourselves, and the two most basic components of mindset are words and breath. Words and breath. The words that we use and our breathing. Good luck separating those things. And what we would likely do is that, and turn the volume down on it. So it's it's manageable for them. And yeah, so in the late 90s, I was on one of the two original MMA teams out of Virginia. There was one in Richmond. There was one down in, it was a group of Navy SEALs that were fighting out of in Virginia Beach. And in our gym, we had people came from all over the state to train at our gym and fight out of it. So we had a lot of studs. And I was the mediocre athlete there. The mediocre athlete. I was the skinny, mean guy that did pretty okay in the gym. But for whatever reason, I performed very, very well under pressure. So I was one of those guys that gets in the ring and the lights come on and some extra gear shows up. And if I was going to work with someone like that, I would spell it out going forward, as opposed to turning the volume down on what they were. I wasn't worried about anything. I just wanted to get in there. I didn't see one of my superpowers. I didn't give a shit if I got knocked out in front of my friends. I was like, I'm gonna get in there and get in your face, and something's going to happen, and one of us is going to get it. But anyway, that's another story. I usually don't talk about this stuff on podcasts, but I can with y'all because y'all are fighters. It's cool.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, that's cool, man. I know people like that at training. There's this one guy at training. It's like inspiring. You can sort of light him up. And then when he jumps in the cage, he looks like fucking Anderson Silva. I'm like, what's going on?
Is that Marky?
Nah, this is Kyle, dude.
Oh.
Yeah, and Marky. Yeah. Marky's like the Homer Simpson, but when he fights, it's like I almost see similarities in the sense of like, you wouldn't let the nerves get to you or whatnot.
Yeah.
Like for me, the nerves are there, but I do a similar thing where I just think in my head, I'm going to beat this guy, rah, rah. But really, I got the fear behind it all too. But I make myself look scary to him. But really, I'm afraid. But then there's people that aren't doing that. They're just actually not, they don't care. They're just like, fuck it. You know?
Yeah. You want to hear my story? I'm afraid that I'm a kind of like good at training in the open mats and stuff. But if I was to get into the ring, this is the story I'm telling myself. I'd just be so scared and just crumble and it'd fall apart.
Yeah, it's a truth.
That's the truth.
It's a true fear that can definitely happen, man.
Yeah.
In my last fight, like fuck.
Yeah,
it's part of the thrill and the agony.
Yeah,
it's part of the thrill and the agony. And then when I wasn't able to do it anymore, all of the pre-existing fears about me not being good enough. So atelophobia. There's a name for this thing, everybody. Atelophobia. It's the fear of not being good enough. And if you want to get all Tony Robbins about it, he says 95% of everything boils down to that. And I agree with him. And once I couldn't fight anymore because I was jacked up good. I was using that as a Band-Aid for all of the stories in my past that haunted me. A couple of them happened when I was very young. A couple of fights broke out on the playground in elementary school when I was like 6 or 7. I remember the kid's name, Nathaniel Wood and Danny Potter. They got in a fight and I turned around and ran away. And I started secretly calling myself a chicken shit, scaredy pants. And I didn't like that. And so nobody else was calling me that, but I was calling me that. You remember the mindset, the story that we tell ourselves. So I'm going to go out there and prove to these imaginary people that I'm not scared. Okay. And be one of those wild dudes. And then when I couldn't be that wild guy anymore, all those unresolved stories came up with a vengeance. And fortunately, I crossed paths with that guy. I don't know what the hell would have happened if I hadn't got put on the path of being able to consciously and constructively tell myself a quality story to myself. So when someone says that my life is out of control, you know what they're saying? They're saying is my story is out of control. And their story, if someone's life is out of control, their story is out of control. And if their story is out of control, that's because it's up there in their head, which is where people keep almost all their stories, and it's going really, really, really fast. So the faster a story goes, the harder it is to change. I don't care whether that's someone trying to work on their mindset on their own, or a coach trying to help a client with their story. The faster the story is going, the harder it is to change. And then the fastest way to slow down the story is to pick up a pen and get those words written out on paper, because we think faster than we can talk, and we talk faster than we can write. So if you want to slow the thing down times 3, you write it out. And you know what inevitably happens too? You get way more of the detail. Because the story is going slower, and you can get into the devil is in the details. The devil is in the details for the negative ouchy stuff, and the angels are in the details too for the quality things that we've done. Because people don't write down the stories of the ouch and the pain and the sting and woe, and they don't write out the stories of the times that they got it right, the times they knocked it out of the park, when their people were there for them, nice things people have said to them, their wins from childhood. And people inevitably have those things too. And kept up here, it's really hard to change or improve or explore those stories.
Isn't it amazing as a species that we can do that?
Yeah, I know.
That we
I totally agree.
Yeah, that we can write and it's not stuck up there. Like it would be a curse otherwise, you know?
Yeah.
Imagine if you couldn't write.
I know.
Yeah, it's like, fuck.
What about unconscious stories? Because you know how how do you deal with someone who has like a lot of stories, and a lot of the stuff is unconscious? Like, would you say that like when you have a story come up, by looking at that story, dealing with that, more is able to come up? So you start to see more?
Yeah, for sure. Yes, especially if someone is up for exploration and they're working with someone who knows how to ask questions. So when it comes to coaching, take this to the bank. Answers, smarty pants coaches, I got all the right answers for your life. I'm gonna motivate you and have all the right answers. Okay, that's amateur hour for coaching.
That feels draining.
And answers push, questions pull. Answers push, questions pull. Show me a coach with a handful of good questions.
Yeah.
And a coach that knows how to breathe when they're working with people. That's a really big deal, because most coaches do not breathe when they're working with people. What they're doing is they're getting sucked into their client's story. I know it sounds brutal at first, until it's explained, but we tell our coaches, do not believe your clients. Do not believe your client's story. Observe your client's story. Those are two different things. So the Enlifted definition of a drama bond is when a coach believes the story. Okay. Why would I believe the story when I'm going to do my best to help you change this story in about 20 minutes if I do my job half well? So why should I believe the version of the story that we're talking about now, when I know once we get it written out and we start airing it out and we change some words, you're going to have a different story in 35, 45 minutes. Okay. And then from there, from drama bonds, this is very common in the coaching world, especially when a client goes into an emotionally charged story and they go into a stress response, a sympathetic nervous system response, and their breath gets trapped in their chest. A lot of times a coach, because coaches aren't paying attention to their breathing either. They'll drama believe the story. They'll drama bond and also trauma bond with their clients. Okay. So what we teach our coaches to do, and all of this stuff that I talk about on podcasts or workshops, these are tools that you can implement immediately into your life when you're conversing with someone or you're coaching someone. We basically teach the Enlifted system for free because we're teachers. I mean, of course, we have certifications and everything. Got to keep the lights on, but we want people to use these tools and watch what happens. So breathing low and slow, it's super important when you work with someone and helping them change their story. So you get your breath low and slow so you can stay in the observer mode and everything flows a lot faster. And as far as unconscious stories go, a lot of times what people walk in the door with as far as stuff that they want to work on, it's the outermost layer of the onion. And if you know how to ask good questions, then you can get back to those unconscious stories. So for me, an unconscious story is all of my stories that I'm not consciously thinking about right now. Okay. If we want to look at it like a book, okay, I'm reading a book right now, and that's my conscious story. And then I'm reading a book in a library, and I've got all these books behind me. Like, I'm not thinking about my dad right now. I wasn't thinking about my dad 10 seconds ago until I thought to think about him. But those stories, I had access to them. Or how about my bicycle when I was a kid? Or how about when I was a wrestler? Or like all the stuff you're not thinking about right now, for me, those are your unconscious stories. And a lot of times you just need some good questions in a handful of seconds, and you can get to the unconscious stories that are really driving the bus. I mean, this is an intense example, and it's the first one that came to mind. So we've done a lot of workshops. And one of the ones that we did for the public, this was about 2.5 years ago. There's about 130 people on the call. I'm facilitating it, and we had a writing prompt. And it was, okay, everybody. We played a couple of language games to warm everybody up, and then said, okay, we're all going to write for 5 minutes. Only if you want to. If you just want to observe, that's cool too. And I want you to pick an entry point into your story. Okay, pick something, one of these three things. Something that you're annoyed about, something that is either annoying you, hurting you, or haunting you. One of those three things. And you're going to write for 5 minutes. Something that's annoying you, something that's hurting you, or haunting you. And so they did. They wrote for 5 minutes. And the first woman I picked on, dude, I mean, you could hear a pin drop on this thing. It went from the heat got turned up in the kitchen real fast. Which is why if you're going to go into someone's stories with them, you want to get your breath low and slow and keep it there. So when they go into a stress response or they get emotional, it's the same thing about stories that are still in there causing problems. You don't lock up with them. So you don't trauma bond with them. You stay in that observer role. You know, we have a saying in Enlifted that good breathing equals good coaching. You know why? Because good breathing equals good listening. And good listening equals good coaching. So good breathing equals good coaching. What show me the best? Show me a coach that knows how to breathe low and slow, and that has a handful of good questions, and I'll show you a top 2%er right then and there. So this woman wrote out. She picked annoyed, and she wrote out the story of someone at work talking behind her back. And I had her read what she wrote verbatim, which is another reason you want to have people write things out conversationally. And she read what she wrote, and I asked her the first set of magic questions. There's only 3. What are you feeling? She said, I'm feeling disappointed. Second question, where are you feeling that? In my chest. 10's high, 1's low. What number is it? 7. It's the first set of magic questions. And it's a setup for the second set. And then I asked her, when was the first time you ever felt that feeling of disappointment? Does it take you back to a specific event or time frame? And she it took her about 1 second to go, yeah, I've got a specific event. And I go, what happened? And she goes, well, that reminds me of when I was 13 and I walked in to my brother's bedroom and he had hung himself and he was purple and I found him dead. You could hear a pin drop.
Yeah.
And see, she was up for it. And I said, have you ever titled and written that story out? She goes, no, it's haunted me my entire life and I have a problem trusting people. See the stuff that the patterns that we have as adults, it's not like they're not there for a reason. They're there for a reason. They're coming
Yeah.
from somewhere, and you can do something about it, everybody. You don't need a
Mm.
PhD. You didn't need a PhD when you were 9 to tell yourself a story about what the divorce of your parents meant. And you don't need a PhD to pick up a pen when you're 39 or 29 or however old and write that story out and get it out of your head and air the damn thing out. Okay. We can do tremendous amounts of good work on our own or with a skilled practitioner that's not going to, I'll stay out of all that. So, you know what we did? We four-stepped that story. Okay. So this adds some context to what I've talked about a couple of times. And also you guys have talked about it, talking about Spirit Gym. And shout out to Paul Check. That guy is a G, man. We've been very fortunate. We've gone on his show twice.
Oh.
And yeah, we were smart about it. We went out to Rainbow, what is it called?
House. Yeah.
Rainbow House. Yeah, we went out there twice.
Sick.
Yeah, in person each time. So Kimberly and I, she's our podcast host. She's one of our partners. It's myself, Kimberly, and then Adam. That's the core team of Enlifted. And we went out there. So this is just a little shout out to Paul.
Yeah, love it.
About Paul. We went out there and we were with bags, because you're gonna blow some bags with Paul Check. Right? So with bags and stopping for coffees, it was about 4.5 hours of recording.
Wow.
And which is a decent day. And that guy's busy, trust me.
Oh yeah.
Not like, I mean, you guys know. And he showed us around the entire property after that. Spent a lot of time with us after that. And then the second time we went out there to do his show, we had dinner with him afterwards. And so you show me somebody who's generous with their time.
Yeah.
And you can learn a lot about somebody like that, especially when their time is that valuable and they're in that much demand. Now he's a generous dude, and dude, I didn't know what to expect when we were driving up there. I told Kimberly, I was like, this is going to go one of two ways. There's one of two ways. It's either going to be an absolute disaster zone, and he's a mad scientist, and there's shit everywhere, and only he knows where everything is, or it's going to be like a curated museum. There's only one or two ways that this is going to go. And it was totally a curated museum. Yeah. I've never seen someone's library like that. His books, each book, he's got thousands of books, has got about 30 notations coming out of it. And he knows where all that stuff is. It really is mind-boggling.
It is.
It's mind-boggling. And so you were talking about words and breath and the story that we tell ourselves. And a lot of times, everybody, it's not the story that gets us. It's the repetition of the story that gets us. It's the repetition. So it's yeah, okay, the thing happened once, but we play it 1,000 times. And so it's the repetition of it, and it's also the meaning that we assign to it. So this woman had this story of her brother hanging himself and her finding him, running in the background, and she had never written it down. And like I've said earlier, it's true. You can Google it. Stories kept in the head are very hard to deal with compared to stories that are written down. And so she four-stepped it. This is Enlifted tech. Step 1, title it, write it out conversationally. She did that right on the call. There's 130 people watching. Step 2, read what you wrote, regular speed. Step 3, read the same story 30% slower. What happens, everybody, when someone slows down their rate of speech? The breath starts to loosen up. Very important. So story kept in the head going very fast, breath trapped in the chest. Breath trapped in the chest, that's a white knuckle grip on how the story is put together and what it means. I mean, good luck changing your client's mind if their breath is trapped in their chest. Everybody have fun with that. And then step 4, it's a slow read, and then in between each sentence, it's this. And then they go back to the sentence. And again, jujitsu, leverage, mechanics. Here's what mechanically happens with stories. Story kept in the head, breath trapped in the chest, your face.
Mm.
Wherever you go, there it is. You want to get that fucker out of your head and written out, and then read and read slow and read with breath and unlock the breath. So as the breath descends, it unlocks and descends, the picture zooms out. And you go from the participant to the observer. And your client changes their mind on their own. I don't have to have any answers for them.
That's cool, man. That sounds like that really lights me up, because I've found, like, I'm mainly working with the body, right? People come and see me for back pain, but then they'll start telling me their story, and you end up being these two things, right? And it's good when I have, like, Jake's experienced a lot with that sort of stuff, so he has. I know we're talking about the words, but he seems to have some words on a book that he's read or something that can give them a bit of guidance or help, you know? But I've always felt like, oh, that's not my way, because I don't have the same words, you know? I don't have that, and I don't have the answers for these people. But I think that really stands out for me, because I can say I am happy. I can say I am happy, and I can also say that I know, compared to a lot of people, we'll have our own negative stories, but I don't have a lot that just can slam in my head all the time, when I can see others do have a hard time with that. And and I think that's what they're trying to get from me, but I don't know how to I don't know how to give that to them, because I see that's really just in my dad, really, you know, sort of that thing. Mm-hmm. But for you in your own life, do you have something, like with your stories, do you have something you work on every single day? Like, do you have a system in place that you have each day, or just if you catch yourself with a story, are you just getting really good at witnessing it?
Very good at witnessing it. And so I pay very close attention to the words that I use. So the words that I think, the words that I speak, the words that I write. So there's an everyday practice of using my words in a certain way to create space and clarity, first and foremost with myself, and then other people in my life. When I first got, and I didn't have the vocabulary to describe what I was doing, and in hindsight. So it's basically, most people that get into personal development, and there's so many ways to go about developing oneself personally or interpersonally, they have a problem to solve. There's something going on. Very rarely does someone get into personal development because everything's going great and the sun's out. Or very rarely does somebody book in for coaching when everything's going fantastic and they're like, yeah, I got this. No, there's something that gets them to start searching, and there's usually a cleanup period. So where you go in, and I mean, if you're lucky enough to do it right, you dismantle the victim mentality. Now, the definition of the victim mentality, and then I'll circle back. I'll get this on the table, and then circle back to my daily practices. Because there's two main ones. I have two main practices when it comes to my storytelling. Mm-hmm. Whether it's me telling me a story or me telling someone else a story, because that's the only two ways it happens. Mm-hmm. Okay. Me telling me a story, or I'm telling someone else a story. Mm-hmm. And I have two daily practices. They're both the same thing, really. But before I got to where I could tell fun, good, clear, constructive, valuable stories to myself and other people, most of the time I had to break the spell of the victim mentality. Now, the definition of the victim mentality, I'm going to recite it, everybody, verbatim. Most people have never heard the definition of the victim mentality, much less written it down. So you're listening to this podcast, that's cool. Don't do it if you're driving. Get a pen and a piece of paper and write this down. We've been talking about this for years, well over a decade, full time. Because it's again, it's in my personal and professional opinion, it's hard to have a very hard to have a well-rounded conversation about mindset without a working definition or even better, a verbatim definition of the victim mentality. Because again, that's what most people are fighting like hell every day. So I'm gonna do this twice. I'm gonna recite it twice. The first time, I'm gonna go slow. Second time, I'm gonna speed it up and I'm gonna add some context. So this is the verbatim definition of the victim mentality, everybody. The victim mentality is an acquired personality trait where a person tends to regard himself or herself as the victim of the negative actions of others, even in the absence of clear evidence. The victim mentality depends on a habitual thought process and attributions. That's the verbatim definition. Here it is a little bit faster. The victim mentality is an acquired personality trait where a person tends, it's a tendency, everybody. Sometimes it's up, sometimes it's down. A person tends to regard himself or herself as the victim of the negative actions of others, even in the absence of clear evidence. Here's the second sentence, which is right between the eyes, right where it belongs. The victim mentality depends, as in it has to have a habitual, which accurately implies duration and addiction. Habitual thought process. What's a thought process? Glad you asked. It's how you use your words. That's all that is. And attributions. What's an attribution? An attribution is a characteristic. And the number one characteristic that we pay attention to at Enlifted, besides the words, certain words that the victim mentality has to have in place, otherwise you're not getting it, is how people breathe. And most people's language is working against them. They're creating versions and flavors of the victim mentality over and over and over again. The breath gets trapped in the chest. It's called amygdala hijack. People's listening skills tank. They get super focused on the problems, and this thing turns into an addiction. And so quite literally, when people first start working on themselves, they have to break their addiction to their victim-centric stories, and that can be quite the task. Once that's done's too much of a word, once the volume is turned down on that thing, then you move into more of a maintenance program, okay, where you're conscious, you're paying attention to your words.
Yeah,
Let's
cool.
get all Alan Watts about it. Alan Watts, he's the best. He said, when you learn to think about your thinking, you become alive in a new way.
That's cool, man.
It's so cool, man.
Yeah.
And that's what we help people do, is to think about their thinking. That's it.
Yeah.
Well, there's more to it than that, but that's it in a nutshell.
What do you think it is about people being addicted to victim thinking? What are they getting out of it? Are they getting, or did they get a pass? Did they get a pass attention or love from someone from doing it? Or like,
that's a fantastic question. That's part of it. You know, if that's how they get if their victim-centric story is their social currency with their friends and family, okay, then that's going to be even harder to deal with. Yeah, so it's like the gossip table at work. Or people that just get together and complain about shit. Those people are trauma bonding. And if that's someone's social life, not only are you going to need a new story, you're going to get a different set of friends. There's that, and then there's this thing called secondary gains. And so what does the person get out of let's see, what would be a good example here? People use their victim mentalities, their perceived limitations. Some people do. Some people use their perceived limitations, their excuses, their problems, as a way to protect themselves from being seen. So let's just say someone's got a fear of public speaking. That's not that good of example. Let's say someone is always broke, and they maintain that pattern and story and keep, mooching off of, let's say, their family, because it's safer for them than going out and making something of their life and risking failure.
Mm-hmm.
It's called secondary gains. It is bizarre.
Yeah.
But people, what are you getting out of it? What are you getting out of staying sick?
Yeah, I think it's a love thing too. Like as a child, when you'd stub your toe or something like that and your parents give you love and you start to develop this like, oh, that's the way I receive love. If I kick my toe and I'm the victim, oh, poor me. And they never actually grow out of the child and develop their ego fully. And like Paul says, most people haven't developed past the age of 12. So it's like you get stuck in the child a lot of your life. And I see that a lot. I see that a lot with clients, and they'll be like still just telling that victim story over and over and over. And you're like, where does that truly come from? And I was thinking about it with a guy I know that lies a lot. And I was like, where did he get that? And I was like, I was thinking the other day, just thinking out loud now, he would have had to have got that from when he was with his father, and he had a relationship with his father that was really hard, and he always had to tell his father how good he was. And I'm like, now this lies just keep going and going and going. And I was thinking, wow, that's such a strong trait that's like carried over into life, and he's unconscious of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you remember that story you told of Jan, and that person was that woman that was like telling her the story, and she was like, listen, I'm not going to let you just keep wallowing in the story.
Yeah,
do you remember something like that?
Yeah, I remember something like that. I can't remember it word for word.
And then do you remember with you, and you told her about, oh, I'm sick of running into this person all the time. They're really stealing my energy.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And then she was like, no, that's
your shit.
That's your shit. That's not him. It's you're in control of your own energy and stuff. Like,
yeah,
it was such
totally.
a cool, instant little unique, like, oh, okay. Like,
yeah, just
most people just like, yeah.
Yeah.
Let you wallow in it.
And that's it, eh? Like a lot of people in their friend groups are all they hold. It's like a victim group mentality, and you're allowed to tell your story and oh poor me, oh my, and it's hard to be around that once you wake up a little bit to just your story.
It's the victim Olympics.
Yeah.
Whoever's got the worst story wins.
That's right, dude.
I remember Joe Rushton said misery loves company.
Yeah.
Yeah. Man, if you witness this in others and they're unconscious about it, and you know that if you were to bring it up, generally it's going to be come with anger, or they're going to get angry, or is there a way that you would approach that, or is that just on their journey? When they're ready to jump on it, they will? Or can you bring light to it in someone without making them feel attacked?
That's a tough one.
Yeah.
And there's always something that you can do about that kind of scenario, and that is to breathe low and slow around them. Okay, that's my answer to 95% of everything. By the way, is breathing well. Yeah, and if someone doesn't want to look at something or change, a letter from Congress and an email from Jesus isn't going to do it.
Yeah.
It's just not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. I mean, we have a code of conduct with Enlifted and the Enlifted coaches, and it goes like this: when it comes to working on stories with people, and this is not someone that let's say in your family that keeps doing something and you want to bring it to life, but there is a parallel. So if someone has a story, just like that woman who walked in on her brother, found her brother, if she had said, I don't want to go in there, I don't want to go into that, I would have been like, great, I don't want to go in there either.
Yeah.
So if someone has a story and they want to go in there, I'll go in there.
Yeah.
I know what I'm doing. If someone has a story and they don't want to go in there, you couldn't pay me $1 million to go in there. Why would I want to go in there if they don't want to go in there? And so take that outside of coaching and just apply it over there. If someone doesn't want to look at their stuff, why do I want to talk about it with them? That's some kind of weird my attachment to that.
Yeah.
Okay. When I can just breathe low and breathe well while I'm around them and observe.
I love how you said before 95% of it you believe is breathing. And I truly believe that too. It's like that's everything, because then you get your clear download, you get you stay in your center, and you can just be like, what are they really telling me right now? But without that, it's kind of like you can't really pick up on that, or you can't see it, or you can't feel it, more importantly. Yeah.
Yeah. You just hit a lot of them right there, brother. Seriously. Breathing in the chest is a very noisy place in one sense, because it creates extra tension in the body. 1, 2, it's called amygdala hijack. You can look it up. The listening skills tank. You lose access to your peripheral vision.
Sorry, bro. Can we just stop this for 1
I just got to
sec?
quickly chuck it on charge, man.
Yeah, the laptop's about to go dead. I don't want to cut you off.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I know where I'm at. Story to do it.
Oh, did it fall out? Did it? Oh, sweet. All good.
All right, we're good now.
All right, we're back on. Sorry, man. Sorry to cut you off.
No, all good. Yeah. So when someone breathes well, you're giving yourself access to a lot of information and sensory input that most people are going to miss. When someone's breath is trapped in their chest, again, that's excess rigidity in the body. The body is a very finely tuned instrument. And I'm not talking about being sensitive, like emotionally sensitive. I'm talking about sensing things in the environment. Somebody walks in, they got a weird vibe to them. You sense that. Okay. Somebody's looking at you from behind you from across the room, and you just turn around and lock eyes with them like that. What's that about? That's a sensation. And when you breathe well, your sensory perception is way more. Well, it's not getting the static or the interference or the distortion that most people miss so much, because they're in their head. You've heard that. And if they're in their head, then their breath is trapped in their chest, and they're sucked into their own world. There's a lot more to pay attention to than that. Yeah. So it's a cooler place to live. It's a cooler way to be. There's way more flow to it. Talk about flow states.
Yeah.
It's all about the breath.
Fuck, that's spot on.
Yeah, we did a heart opening. Well, we'd start Spiritual with a heart opening meditation every single time, and it's like 5 minutes. You just put whatever hand feels good over the heart, and he's like 2/3 into the belly and then up into the chest. And I've done a fair bit of breath stuff before, but I find that this takes 2-3 minutes. By the end of it, you're smiling because you're breathing love in and then giving unconditional love out into the world. And by the end of it, you're just smiling. You've just like upped you're vibrating a little higher. And I think that's amazing, even just to work with clients or hang out with your friends or anything, because you can really listen. Everyone loves to be heard. And I think like,
well said.
Yeah. When you got one mouth and 2 ears for a reason, eh?
Man, so for people listening to this, and especially in the Australian crowd, and we got a fair few listeners in the States actually, but how do people find out more about you, find out if they want to either learn this method or seek help as a client?
Gotcha. Good question. Thank you. For the certifications, go to enlifted.me. That's the website.
Enlifted.me.
Enlifted.me. We have an Instagram page at Enlifted Coaches. If anybody would like to work with an Enlifted coach, message us there. I answer all the messages. It's fun. And then we have a podcast. It's called Get Enlifted.
Cool.
And it's all about words and stories and breath.
Sick.
In coaching scenarios and outside of, because it's the same principles apply to, talking with someone about something that's important. as it is when you're helping someone or you're coaching a client. It's the same mechanics. It's the same squiggles and sounds.
Yeah.
Man, sounds so just easy and applicable for people. Yeah. Sounds like a really good model, man.
Really cool model. Yeah.
That's one of our calling cards, man.
Yeah.
We're like, I'm a simple guy to the core.
Yeah.
And it's reflected in what we do.
Dude, simple works.
Dude. And simple ain't easy.
Yeah.
That's the thing. Those are two different words. Simple and easy are not the same thing.
That's so good, man. That should be a shirt. Simple ain't easy. Because it fucking isn't, dude.
Fuck, that's a t-shirt.
That is a t-shirt. Eh? Yeah, like Paul gets people to read out the Four Doctors. They're simple songs, and it's like no one can sing them, dude.
Yeah.
And it's like, I teach this shit over and over and over, and he's like, blows me away that no one fucking knows them. I teach them, they're simple. Like,
yeah.
That's such a, man, you got to put that on a shirt, eh? That's good.
That's sick, man. Well, we'll chuck all that stuff in the show notes, man. If people listening, definitely jump in. And I can't wait to start listening to your podcast, bro. I really look forward to it. Very uplifting and motivated me to go and write down some positive stories and some negative ones and then flip them. And turn it into something cool. So I'm really excited to do that. I'm going to do that later on today.
I want to look into the coaching, man. That sounds really cool.
Yeah, that is really cool. Yeah. It's like that's
read them with breath.
Yeah.
Write it, read it slow with a breath in between each sentence. Watch what happens. If you two have any questions, message me on Instagram or which one of you gentlemen's coming over to the States?
Oh yeah, coming leaving Monday, man. Monday night. So I'll be
we're drop me a line. You got my number.
Yeah, I got your number, dude. I was so keen. I was going to bring that up before we bailed, but yeah, I'm super keen to. I don't know really anyone. I got like 2 buddies over there, and then I know Ryan's coming over for your thing. So yeah, I'm just keen to meet up with some things, shoot some guns even.
Yeah, that'd be sick. That'd be sick. And for the listeners, man, do you have anything you want to any piece of advice you want to give the listeners before we sign off?
Think about your thinking. Don't automatically believe the story you're telling yourself. Learn to observe the story you're telling yourself, and you'll like what happens.
Fuck yeah, it's like
it's a way more magical place to live.
That's
it's the ultimate self-inquiry, isn't it?
Yeah, I totally believe that. I believe that paying attention to our words, if it's not the ultimate self-awareness practice, it's up there.
It has to be, man.
I mean, dude, like what am I? Isn't that a good question? What am I? And here's my simple again. What am I? Or who am I? Who am I? I am who I tell myself I am. And then what am I? I'm the ability to tell myself a story. So I'm the story that I tell myself, and then I'm also the ability to tell myself that story.
Wow.
It's like
that segues into what Paul said to Jake, that God is the myth and the myth maker. So similar, another roundabout way of doing that, you know?
I always think back to like, we talk about words. I'm like, well, words have only been around for a certain amount of years, What was before that when we were more animalistic was like, and when did we start developing words? And I was like, were we thinking in words? We wouldn't have been thinking in words. I'm like, it's a deep thought, eh? Yeah. It's like, we would have just been like feeling and sensing and.
Yeah, I remember we had this guy named Matt Walden on the podcast, and he said this to me. He goes, there would have been one of these, like when as an animal, it was all present, right? But then we would have been one of the first species that had a concept of time, because we would have seen tracks on the ground and known in the past there was food there, and if I follow those tracks in the future, there's going to be food there, which is deep in itself. It's like that would have been one of the first futuristic past thoughts.
Like, ooh.
And then it goes into the concept of time. Then they know that we die. Then you got to answer for death. And then it goes into religion and spirituality. And it goes deep. But that'll be another podcast we can go deep on.
Yeah, I have no answer for that. What were we doing before words? I just thought about that hard for about 6 seconds.
Yeah.
I have no idea.
Yeah.
No clue.
Neither.
Yeah. Anyway, man, appreciate you coming on, and thanks for coming.
Fucking ball of energy.
Likewise,
Thank
fellas.
you, man.
Yeah.
You're a legend.
Appreciate
your time, man. And I'll definitely shoot you a message when I'm in Austin. So that'll be next week. I get there Tuesday night. So
yeah. Cheers,
Perfect.
bro.
We'll be there in 2 weeks.
Hell yeah,
Later,
my friend.
fellas.
Legend.